Okay, welcome everyone. It's Tuesday, March 25th. We're here in Council Chambers at 6:30 p.m. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting. Also would like to acknowledge that today is a very significant day for a variety of reasons. Very shortly, we look forward to welcoming a delegation in anticipation of Green Shirt Day, which is on April 7th. But before we go there, I just wanted to highlight, and I think council colleagues are very aware, that today is International Day of Forests. It's United Nations declared day, and as all of us know, we have great forested space here in North Grenville through the Ferguson Forest and Limerick and our own Kemptville campus, where there will be a maple weekend in very short order, just a couple of weeks away. So we'll look forward to welcoming folks in our community and beyond for that. It's also the International Day for the Elimination of Racism and Discrimination. And finally, it is World Down Syndrome Day, and I believe some of my council colleagues may be wearing mismatched socks in recognition of the day, which is the protocol. I don't know if anyone wants to feature their mismatched socks, but I believe Councillor Sullivan may be displaying them to her colleagues. So lots going on, not just in our community, but certainly in our country and around the world. So I hope everyone's had 5 minutes to at least appreciate the wonderful forested spaces around us, if nothing else. With that, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll invite someone to read our land acknowledgement, please. Who would like to do that today? Councillor Strachan?
The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Awesome, thank you. I understand the sound is a bit echoey. Yeah, okay. So we'll just ask Megan, who's ably managing the AV from above, to see if she can make that adjustment. Thank you, Megan. I think it's better now. Does it feel? Okay. All right.
Do I sound? No, it's very echoey.
Okay, we'll see if Megan can work on that a little bit. All right, we're going to move to approval of the agenda. Council colleagues, you'll see the agenda as presented. I'll look for a mover and seconder unless there is any feedback or suggestions. Councillor Barclay, are you moving? Councillor Sullivan, you will second. Thank you very much. Then I will call the question. All in favor, please. Good. We have an agenda. Moving to disclosures of interest, colleagues, this is in regards to any declarations about perceived or real financial benefit or loss arising from the agenda this evening. Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be recusing myself from discussion and voting on item I.4.1, development charges, due to a perception of conflict of interest involving my employer and their interest in a development named in the report.
Very good then, thank you. So with that, it's our pleasure to welcome Ethan Boss back to the council table. Ethan has presented a number of times to us on Green Shirt Day, and we really look forward to hearing more about how Green Shirt Day has evolved and where we're at now. And thank you very much, Ethan, for being with us.
Well, thank you. So first off on the list, again, thank you for letting me come back to, well, just pretty much talk about the changes and different things that have happened since I was last here. First off, I'm back here again to spread the wellness and knowing of the Logan Blay effect, also known as Green Shirt Day, to, again, bring more awareness to organ donation, which is needed, and to hopefully inspire more people like I was inspired by Logan, so that way they sign their organ donor card and realize that it really is something that this world truly needs right now. Green Shirt Day is both a day to honor the lives lost and those forever changed as a result of the Humboldt Broncos crash. Logan had been influenced by many of people, mostly was his mentor Sluggo, to sign up as a registered organ donor and talked his way with his family and to have his decision finalized to be an organ donor. After the tragic bus crash, Logan Belay's family honored his wishes to donate his organs upon his death. This act positively changed the lives of 6 people and brought awareness to our country and inspired over 150,000 people to sign their organ donor card. 4 years ago, I was inspired by Logan Belay to take this to my school and have Green Shirt Day recognized. From there, I was recommended by a few teachers and principals to take this forward, as we are a hockey community. To my parents' surprise, I wasn't that nervous talking to all of you. You made me feel so welcome. My parents were a mess, and don't tell them. You mentioned that one province, PEI, now have an opt-out, and that maybe I should mention it to our MPP and MP and see if we could do it as well. So my going forward is all your fault. Thank you so much for the encouragement. Unfortunately, COVID came, but it did not stop Green Shirt Day and organ donation awareness. Thanks to the suggestions from Mr. Barrett and MPP Mr. Clark, saying I should speak to their ridings and get it declared first. Green Shirt Day has been declared in a few places along with Athens, Augusta, Edwardsburg Cardinal, Front of Young, Merrickville, here in North Grenville, Ottawa, Prescott, Rideau Lakes, Westport, Brockville, and Smith Falls. Here are a couple of photos of different things. If you look there on the very bottom, I have the formal declaration of Ontario. For Ontario, I will hand this one sec. I turned 16 this year, and this year I finally registered as an organ donor. What matters to me? What matters to me is that the youth and adults go home and just have the conversation with their families about organ donation, because I sure did. I have friends, they have said that they're not ready yet, and someday they are. Yeah, sign me up. Either is okay. We are only 16, 17. We still have a long time to make these decisions. But they are having the conversation, and that is what is important. Since we last talked, as I've already proven, this is the huge thing that has happened to me, and it would be the bill. Without the help of our MPP Mr. Clark and MPP Mr. Persa for bringing it forward, my dream of Green Shirt Day in Ontario would not have been declared, so I should say thank you to both of them. This photo is taken on March 10th, 2022. I was presented the Green Shirt Day bill at my school by so many that had supported me. I was honestly a little overwhelmed and very pleased. I am honestly very lucky to have the friends I do as they came to the ceremony at my school. They all came out, and for that, I am very grateful to have such nice friends. What I recently found out is, did you know that only 3% of private member bills have been passed since 1867, the Confederation? Green Shirt Day bill passed in 3 days and Royal assessed in 6. It was passed unanimously. Youth under voting age rarely send a bill. You never know what you can do. I have also just learned that there has been an arena renamed in Logan's honor, which is now the Logan Belay Arena in Lethbridge, Alberta, where every April 7th they will have a family skate day in awareness of Green Shirt Day. I hope to attend one day. The biggest take I want people from me is that I'm not doing this to make myself look great. I want people to be inspired and realize the impact that organ donation has on the world. It was your suggestion that I take it forward to MPP and MP that pushed it. Because of all of this, we have brought more awareness to organ donation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ethan, and I think, thank you for sticking with it, because sometimes when you have a powerful idea, it's hard to navigate your way through various levels of government and speak with, certainly an MP or an MPP can feel very intimidating in the moment, but you obviously had the conviction and the passion and the commitment to really see this through and make history, and that's amazing, and we're so proud of you. Obviously, here in North Grenville, homegrown youth leader who really sought to make a difference, a positive difference, after such a tragic event in our country. So you've really moved us and touched us with your energy and the time and support of your family that has allowed this to happen. And of course, we'd like to thank MPP Steve Clark. When he called me, as I think he called you, Michelle, to say how excited he was that he was able to get this bill through just before the legislature shut down in advance of an election, it was really exciting for him. So I know how important it was that he seized what is often a very narrow window in a legislative session to actually move forward something that doesn't come from either the government or the opposition. So I think a great day for everyone. If you were speaking to other youth leaders, as I'm sure you have from time to time, and advising them on how they make a difference for something that they care a lot about, what would you say to them? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but obviously you've had a really wonderful journey here.
I honestly haven't spoken to a lot, but I've heard from many people that I agree, it is a big topic to decide at this time, but it doesn't hurt to talk to your family in case something tragically happens, so that they already know, because people don't want the last conversation that people have with your parents saying, do you want your son to donate his organs? Like, it's not something you want as a conversation. I think it's something that your parents should know ahead of time, just in case something happens, so that way they are aware and ready, instead of it just being out of the blue.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and often in the most tragic of circumstances, that's not where your head is, right? So it's great to be able to bring some clarity. Even as, I think, a young adult, we often think that younger adults or teens aren't in a position to articulate what they think they would want in that moment, but I think it's really amazing to really create the conditions for that conversation to occur. So thank you so much. I think we'd like to do one more group photo now that Councillor O'Sullivan has joined us, but we should also show everyone these fantastic hockey sticks that were shared with all of council. So maybe we can all feature our hockey sticks. But the other thing we wanted to say tonight, and Jill Sturdy is with us in the audience, is based upon the fact that we know that lots of people would like to have their desire to have their organs donated. They know they would like to do that, but the reality is people don't always find their way to the beadonor.ca website, where in 3 basic steps, right, less than 5 minutes, they can really make that commitment. So Council, I think we all confirmed that we are organ donors. So we've all signed the card, or when we renewed our license, we made that decision. So we're all organ donors here, and we'd like to encourage residents in North Granville and beyond to take time between now and April 7th, and of course beyond April 7th, but between now and Green Shirt Day, we really want to get people to really make their way to that website so that they can make that decision and express their desire clearly. And then it's behind them. I understand you only have to do it once, right? You don't have to do it more than once. So we're very hopeful that with the assistance of our comms team and with your energy and leadership as well, we can create the conditions for a higher percentage of residents in our own community to sign up to be a donor. Because at the end of the day, I think that was your vision and your hope. So with that, we'll just go out in front. We'll hold our hockey sticks. We'll have the family come back and we'll do a little photo. So, Council, we'll just move to receive the report from Ethan in regards to the presentation around Green Shirt Day. And once again, we will invite Council to declare April 7th, 2023, Green Shirt Day in North Grenville. I believe we may have already declared it in perpetuity, but just in case, we'll make sure that it is once again marked and noted this year. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor O'Sullivan, Councillor Strachan, thank you. And that is moved. So I'll call the question. All in favor, please? Good. So that is passed. Next, colleagues, we are going to the consent agenda. You'll see a number of items on the consent agenda, and I'll look to see if any council member wishes to remove an item on the consent agenda. Councillor Wilson, I see your green arm. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to pull G4, Public Works, off the consent agenda.
Sure. Okay, that item will be pulled. Anything else for consideration, colleagues? Seeing nothing, then I will call the question on the amended consent agenda, which will now include G1 to G3. G4 will be dealt with under Public Works. All in favor, colleagues? Call the vote. Do I need a mover and seconder? Have I done that already? Okay, I apologize. I called the vote ahead of the consent agenda. Mover and seconder. Councillor Barclay and Councillor Sullivan. So we have moved and seconded the amended agenda. I will now call the question. All in favor? Good. Thank you. So with that, I'll go to reports. Office of the CEO, Acting CEO, Ms. Dunlop, is there anything from you this evening?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there's nothing under my under the CAO's office this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're going next to corporate services, and I'll just look to we'll look to Ms. Jeannot for guidance in terms of corporate services, please.
Through Your Worship, the first report we have tonight is the Council Legal Expenses Report. And the slide should be up for all of you. So this is just a follow-up. A couple months ago, we had received direction from Council to look into adding this to the Council Code of Conduct policy. So this is just a report back. So a little bit of background. So the Municipal Act includes payment of any damages or costs, including those required by legal settlements or legal defense. And such policies have been recommended by integrity commissioners in other communities. The objective of such a policy is to basically protect personal financial loss for council members when acting within their scope of duties. And there's just a little error on the slide, so it should say 35-23 for the bylaw. And if you read the report, it shows that the Council Code of Conduct, the new cost limits for this policy would be $500 for consultation and up to $5,000 if for other legal costs if there's no contravention of the Code of Conduct. So the recommendation tonight is that Council pass and act bylaw 35-23, a bylaw to amend the Code of Conduct policy for members of Council.
Okay, colleagues, any concerns or questions in regards to this particular recommendation? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillors Barclay and Councillor O'Sullivan. Any further, any questions, I should say? No. Further, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. So we'll carry on to Physician Incentive Program, something that has been in the works for some time.
Okay, so again, this is a follow-up to a previous council report. So we're just talking tonight about the Primary Care Incentive Program. A little bit of background, over the past, I'd say, year and a half to 2 years, council had received an increase in complaints from residents about lack of physicians or the loss of physicians at their family clinics. Local clinics have wait lists exceeding over 3,000 people. The municipality convened a stakeholder group with the local hospital and the local family health organizations, or FOs. And through that, we created the North Grenville Primary Care Strategy that council adopted last year. And one of the recommendations within that strategy was to create an incentive program to attract physicians. So the purpose of tonight is just to confirm the details of that program and have council adopt said program. So the details are that physicians would be receiving $100,000 over 5 years, so that's $20,000 a year. And the physicians that would be eligible for this are recent graduates or those that are new to practicing in the province. Physicians would be able to practice at any of the 3 local clinics, being the Family Health Organizations or FOs. Physicians would have to conduct 70 to 75% of their time at the local family practice. And they also must provide coverage at the Kemptville District Hospital. And working with the hospital, they have identified a number of different areas that the physicians could work at the hospital to give them some different experiences that they might not have gotten otherwise. Physicians must take on a roster of a minimum of 800 patients, and they cannot bring patients from another practice. And so applications would be considered on a first-come, first basis, predicated on the availability of positions at the local clinics, as well as council approving said budget each year. The recommendation is that council adopt the North Grenville Primary Care Incentive Program.
And to be clear, this money, these funds were budgeted and approved as part of the North Grenville municipal budget in 2023.
Correct. $40,000 is included in the 2023 budget.
And that 40,000 would be split between 2 different physicians should they become available.
Correct.
Right. And Hillary, as you know, some of us have been part of that conversation with the working group that you established and led, and Councillor Strachan, when she was on the hospital board, I'm sure was having similar conversations about physician recruitment. We know it's a hyper-competitive environment now. Can you just enlighten those who might be listening about the competitive environment that exists right now and how you think this program compares to others in surrounding municipalities or surrounding counties?
Certainly, through your worship, you're correct. It is a very competitive program. We do have a number of facets working in North Grenville's favor, including the fact that we are considered a return of service area. So any physicians who are recent graduates, but their country of origin is outside of Canada, they have to practice in a return of service area, which includes places like North Grenville. And being so close to Ottawa, we do feel that we have a little bit of a draw with that. With regards to other programs, many communities do have similar programs. I believe we would be the only one in in Leeds and Grenville with such a program, but many other Ontario communities have similar programs, most in the exact same cost range.
That 100,000 over 5 years is fairly standard if you're looking at an incentive program in Ontario.
Correct. I believe I've only seen one that was for more, which was 150.
Okay. And what's your sense of how physicians who might have an interest in practicing in this community, what do you think would attract them to this particular area, just given the conversations you've been having with some of our local family clinics, et cetera?
So talking with one of our new recent physicians that I believe Councillor O'Sullivan actually helped us attract, I think one of the draws was being close to a major city, but also having a small town feel. And I believe they got to know some of the community members, particularly at the hospital, and were able to focus on some certain specializations that were a passion for them. Through this program as well, we've been meeting with students who are part of medical programs. We invite them to come to North Grenville, and they do practicums at the clinics, and we try to show them around the community as well. And one thing I've heard is just how welcoming the community is, particularly when they find out that the student is considering North Grenville to work. So I think that's definitely something that it's part of the program, is just making sure people feel welcomed in the community.
Councillor O'Sullivan, do you want to add anything, given your direct experience with a newly recruited physician?
Thank you, Ms. Janot, for your report. I worked in primary care for the last 15 plus years, and I know how important it is, and I know that we are desperate here to have more family physicians or primary care practitioners, and that includes nurse practitioners. And when we discussed this over the past couple of years, we talked about other strategies as well as recruiting and an incentive program to bring physicians. So I'd like to know the status of some of those other strategies. We recently heard on the news that Carleton Place was awarded a family health team, which would certainly solve a lot of the problems here. And I just wonder what incentives or what strategies are going to be put in place to attract a nurse practitioner, or to, I don't see anywhere that it encouraged the primary care physician to hire a registered nurse or a registered practical nurse in the practice, which would improve access and probably allow the physician to roster more than 800 patients if they had a nurse working to full scope of practice. So financially and in terms of good service for the community, I think it would be wise to look at that option as well. And I would, frankly thought it would have been brought forward at the same time as to improving access and recruiting more primary care practitioners, not just physicians.
Go ahead, Judah.
Through you, Your Worship. So the attraction of nurses and looking at nurse practitioners in particular to see how they could fulfill some of the gaps in our clinics is definitely part of the strategy that was approved by council, and we're definitely working on it. At our last stakeholder meeting, a representative from Workforce Ontario, the organization that helps fulfill job gaps in medical fields, did connect our local clinics with a program through the province that funds such positions, other than whether it be administrative or nursing positions, because they don't have programs that fund physicians. So that was what the local clinics were connected to at our last meeting.
So is there a plan going forward that will look to bring nurse practitioners or to have a family health team designated for North Grenville?
Through Your Worship, we continue to advocate to the province to look at the family health team model. There doesn't seem to be a ton of traction from the province on that, but we continue to bring that up in our discussions. And I believe the clinics are looking into the option of that funding program, but some of them struggle with the long-term funding of the positions after the funding through the province ends.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a quagmire where it seems that province currently has a limited interest in sort of incentivizing or changing the funding model as it exists now. At the same time, I've certainly heard that there was some confidence that within the clinic structure, should you want a nurse practitioner, it should be financially feasible to do so, right, with the current fees that are paid out. So I think we're in a bit of a challenging situation where it's not always clear how to bring those particular professionals who aren't physicians, but obviously have advanced medical training, right, as nurse practitioners into communities across Ontario. But certainly in meeting with Minister Elliott a couple of years ago, and in subsequent discussions we've had with the ministry, certainly they're, I think, listening carefully to see where we can achieve some success. I should also say at the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, County Council directed county staff to also look at attracting both physicians and nursing staff to various communities. And so that conversation is also happening, particularly in the context of long-term care, where nurses and nurse practitioners are also extremely highly valued and needed. So it's possible the dialogue may evolve in terms of how we can focus specifically on nurse practitioners over time. So I'll recognize Councillor Strachan.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Ms. Janot. I'm just looking at the program details and wondering if this is a fairly standard list and standard expectation of a new physician in the area for where they would expect to have a minimum amount of coverage, a minimum number of patients, and so on. And if this is a standardized list, would any of this be a deterrent in that it's more than what we would expect, or that is currently practiced by the physicians who are in our area?
Through you, Your Worship. So it's not a standardized list per se. This list did come from the local clinics, but a lot of it is in line with what you'll see, particularly in other smaller rural communities. For example, the coverage at the hospital is typically always expected, including only spending, 30 to 25% at the hospital, and the rest 75 at the clinic. The roster for 800 patients is pretty standard as well for a new physician. The hope is that they'll increase their roster over time, but just for a new physician, that is pretty standard.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'll go to Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Jeannot. Just a note of clarification that we're funding 2 positions. So at a 1-year commitment, a 5-year commitment of $20,000 apiece, that's total of $200,000 that we're committing to this program. I'll just note that in your report, or the detailed report, you mentioned that a comparable was Alberta, in which the province had funding. So I'm hoping that with the other municipalities in the province that have instituted this primary care recruitment, that we're advocating, for some provincial funding, rather than having the municipality to come up with a 5-year commitment and $200,000. I just have one technical question. In the report, you mentioned FHO positions. What does that stand for? I should be asking.
Through your worship, that's the Family Health Organization.
Okay.
And so as Councillor O'Sullivan mentioned, there are other models such as the FIT, which is FHT, and that's more of a multidisciplinary clinic, whereas FOs are specific to funding physician positions.
Okay. Just a final question, and that's regarding the agreement that these physicians would enter into, where they commit 5 years. I note from your report that there are some resignations or whatever. So I'm just curious about how enforceable this agreement is, and whether they would be paying back this money if they don't complete the 5 years or resign within a certain period of time.
Through your worship, so the agreement would stipulate that they have to fulfill the 5 years in order to receive the funds, and then return any if they do not fulfill the 5 years.
Yeah, I would also like to know, Councillor Barclay, I think where the province is particularly interested in providing additional incentives is in rural and remote locations. Of course, here in North Grenville, we might be rural, but we're certainly not remote, and we're very close to major urban centers and arguably are urbanizing. So I don't expect that the province would necessarily contribute dollars to a incentive program. It is a hyper-competitive environment right now, and the reality is that there is precedent for many municipalities and counties to put some money on the table to attract a family physician who's early in their career, or potentially might be later in their career and willing to possibly relocate. So that's my understanding of how some of those provincially funded programs work. It's not obvious to me we would qualify. So that being said, there are two. The financial resources as they exist that were presented in the budget were to recruit up to 2 physicians. I can certainly tell you, given the small glimpses into the various recruitment efforts that are undertaken, not just by our municipality but others, that it's having financial incentive programs is often very helpful, but not necessarily a game changer. Sometimes, these residents are making decisions for a variety of different reasons. I think the financial incentive is part of a successful recruitment strategy from time to time, but I don't think it's it's not the only lever. They really have to feel compelled to work in a smaller community, but at the same time, our partnership with KDH, Grenville District Hospital, is such that they have the opportunity, as Ms. Janou was saying, to learn and be exposed to a variety of different skill sets in a hospital environment. So I think the hope is that does allow us to be comparable to some larger urban centers where that hospital access is also sort of assumed. Have I fairly stated that?
Yes.
Okay. So any other questions on this program? Seeing none, I'll ask that members of council move and second the adoption of the strategy. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Sarkian? Councillor Wilson? Okay. The motion's on the table. Any further debate or concern? No. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, good. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay. And Councillor Sullivan, I think the cue we're getting from you is you'd like to potentially see the program modified down the road to include that nurse practitioner piece. Okay. Well, Mr. Janu certainly can perhaps do some more research into Workforce Ontario and how those resources are flowing and whether or not we have to amend the program in the future. Good. Okay. So I think that concludes the updates from corporate services. Do I have that right? Just give me 1 sec. Okay, so next we have planning and development, and I believe Ms. Martin, you are here to talk about the downtown Kemptville development charges exemption. I understand Councillor Barclay is leaving the room. All right, he's putting his shoes on because he wanted to display his socks in recognition of World Down Syndrome Day. Okay. And maybe, Mr. Ogarenda, you can remember to bring Councillor Barclay back after the discussion, okay, in case we forget. Okay, so over to Ms. Martin to talk about the DC charges exemption, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So both my items on the agenda tonight do relate to development charges. So we'll just go to the next slide. So just a little bit of a history on the current exemption of development charges within the downtown. So the exemption was originally included in the 2014 development charges bylaw, and when the municipality updated and put in place the current bylaw in 2019, the exemption was added in for a period of 1 year. So in October of 2020, staff brought a report to council, which by a decision of council extended the exemption until March of 2023, which brings us to our discussion this evening. So the intent of the downtown exemption was originally to encourage new development within the downtown. And in the past year, the municipality has received 3 applications that would see a combined 218 new residential units developed within the downtown area. These development applications have not achieved building permit status yet. So when development charges are collected, it's typically at the building permit stage. So in that regard, they're still, in many ways, within the process of going through development approvals to achieve getting to the building permit stage. Next slide, please. So a few points. The 2015 Master Servicing Plan identified about $70 million worth of infrastructure improvements within the urban area of Kemptville. So the urban area of Kemptville includes the downtown, but it's also much larger. It essentially goes over to what we consider our industrial area and commercial area in the Colonnade, south down to the highway, right to almost down part of the our campus lands, and then it extends west out to just past where Oxford Village Phase 1 will be constructed, and then to the north towards Equinel. So it is quite a large urban area, so it brings in a lot of pieces to brings in a lot of infrastructure that would be subject to that $70 million. The Master Servicing Plan, as has been discussed with Public Works, doesn't just focus in on one specific area. What's important to remember is that development charges fund our growth-related capital projects. So if it's an item such as putting in, a new pipe that's oversized to support, a new development down the road, that would be a DC eligible project where we could use development charges towards supporting that. So the municipality waives development charges currently for affordable housing. And through Bill 23, the Development Charges Act was changed to also exempt not-for-profit housing. So when we do provide an exemption for development charges, there is a financial impact in that we're not collecting those funds to help pay for the infrastructure piece. So we do lose out on the collection of those development charges. Since 2014, there's always been understanding on the part of staff when we factor in the collection of development charges that there is an exemption in the downtown. So the municipality does benefit through the provision of new residential units. This is through things such as our increased tax base, having more residents within the downtown area. And again, as was explained at the beginning of the presentation, the intent of the exemption originally was to encourage new development within the downtown and to increase the number of people that live in proximity to the downtown. I can say anecdotally, in speaking with developers who have the projects, that are in application stage or at various stages of the development approvals process, the exemption of the downtown was a large part of their decision to further invest and to bring their projects and their ideas to downtown Kemptville. So consideration for further exemption of the downtown, exempting the downtown from development charges should be considered as part of our analysis and our 2024 development charges bylaw. So a development charges bylaw is good for 5 years. Under Bill 23, it'll be extended out to 10 years. So we are technically due for our update in 2024. Infrastructure requirements that are needed to support a new development is done so at the developer's cost. So I think this is important to note because in regards to some of our other development applications that have come forward more recently, there's been a lot of concern over, who's going to pay for those infrastructure upgrades, and residents being concerned that, if they need to replace a pipe to support that development, that the residents would be on the hook. So typically what we see through our development applications, our site plan agreements, our plans of subdivisions, would be that the developer would have to pay for those infrastructure upgrades to support their development. And as mentioned, we do look at this as part of the site plan process, and that would be part of the final agreement that we enter into with the developers themselves. So understanding that, I also have a presentation coming up next on the impacts of Bill 23, and that the Bill 23 does have an impact on the exemption piece. It's my recommendation that given we're 1 year out from putting in place a new development charges bylaw, that we extend the exemption for that period until our 2024 bylaw is considered and adopted. That would allow for staff to put some consideration into the updated master servicing plan that Public Works is working in to see if we can tease out what those infrastructure upgrades look like within the downtown Kemptville footprint, but as well the impacts of Bill 23 on our development charge collection itself. That concludes my presentation. I am here to answer questions from members of council.
So any questions or concerns, colleagues, at this stage? Great, okay. So my understanding, Ms. Martin, is the whole development charges bylaw comes back in 2024, so next year, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and there will be a fulsome opportunity at that time to review all aspects of the development charges framework within North Grenville.
Yes, that is correct, Your Worship. It in lines with the Development Charges Act, but any exemptions that you can give through the bylaw itself would be contemplated by council at that time.
So, as I was reminded, we're extending out the exemption as it exists now until we complete that review. And of course, it may carry on into forthcoming years, but we're sort of extending the exemption for what it is today.
Yes, that is correct, Your Worship, and it's something, again, that staff have noted as we go through with various studies that are going to be taking place this year, and with the DC bylaw, that we're going to, seek to provide a little more data and analysis around the downtown. Just given that the exemption's been in place for 2014, and in the last 3 years, we've seen more of that interest grow in creating especially multi-residential units.
Great. I think we look forward to that data. Councillor Strachan?
Thank you, through Your Worship, to Ms. Martin. I think that Kemptville and North Grenville have a lot of other things going for them that is attracting developers. I mean, certainly our location, our high growth trajectory, as well as just in general, sort of where our housing prices sit. I think there's probably a lot that's incentivizing them. The development charges, I'm sure, are part of that, as you mentioned. So I think, looking at this next year, we should probably be looking at a bigger picture as well. Now, I think one of the points that you brought up is, the DC, the development charges allow us to have incentivized growth, but it allows us to pay for growth, right? We're bringing that in so that we can manage whatever upgrades are required. Without those DC charges, those DC charges are hard to say. DCs we're not collecting those funds. So when you say that the developers do need to pay for infrastructure upgrades, what are the limits placed on that? Like, is it just within the immediate vicinity? And perhaps this is a question for Director of Public Works, I'm not sure, but where are the limits on what they can be expected to pay for overall?
Through your worship to Councillor Strachan and the Director of Public Works may want to jump in to assist in providing an answer. So I'll give an example of an ongoing project right now. Oxford Village subdivision is putting in a municipal well. I think everyone's very familiar with the project. So there are, development charges would be collected from their development, but they're also paying for a piece of infrastructure that well will service well beyond the needs of that development. So in certain circumstances, the developer may build it, and we enter into a front-ending agreement to allow for that, like for us to eventually pay those DCs back over time. That would be where we're oversizing anything on the infrastructure side. But it could be as simple as a pipe needs to be upgraded to be a bigger diameter to support the wastewater or water into that property, especially as we're starting to see more multi-residential units with greater number of units coming forward. That might be a necessary thing that would directly just impact their development, and they would be paying for that specifically. But it would be only on the impact of their development. And so again, when anything's oversized, which sometimes we do ask for, there would be a mechanism for that developer to pay for it for us up front, and then we enter into an agreement as to how we pay back the portion that supports that larger growth piece.
Yeah, it sounds like much more to come, right? Once we, a year from now, take a harder look at certainly the benefits, if you will, and also the mechanisms by which municipalities such as ours recover some of those costs. So I'm biting my tongue because I have so many questions, but I don't think this is the moment. So I'll let it pass, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Please, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. And that is that Council extend the exemption of the development charges for downtown Kemptville until a new development charges bylaw is adopted in 2024. Any further questions or concerns? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. So someone can grab Councillor Barkley. Thank you, Mr. Algorande. And we'll move on to municipal impacts of Bill 23, updated report. And of course, it's important to say, Ms. Martin, that you've attempted to provide this presentation multiple times over 3 different months. I would like to acknowledge that I know your son had a medical incident this past weekend and is doing fine now, but we appreciate your considerable efforts to be here, even as your son is recovering and all is well, from what I understand. But yes, it hasn't been an easy journey to this presentation in any way, shape, or form. So I will pass it over to you for the updated report. And obviously the reason Amy is doing this is when the legislation passed, there was a lot of curiosity about possible impacts, and Amy was ready with that presentation back in early January, and here we are in late March. So there you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just confirming that we are live streaming. I do appreciate the fact that this has been a long time coming, and I'll try not to get into, I did update the slides to provide some additional information in regards to some of that financial impact on the DC items. So I may not spend as much time on some of the items as I did in my brief presentation to council when the live stream wasn't working. So if we just go to the next slide. So October 25th of last year, the province introduced what is affectionately known to municipalities as Bill 23. It proposed a variety of legislative changes to the Planning Act, the Development Charges Act, Heritage Act. It impacted many pieces of legislation. The intent of the legislation was to encourage the creation of 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years to increase the housing supply, as well as to support affordable housing initiatives. Bill 23 received royal assent in November of 2022, and then additional regulations on the Conservation Authorities Act came into effect right before the new year, I think December 28th, when everyone was on break. So the Development Charges Act has had substantial changes to it. This now includes the mandatory exemption of affordable and attainable units from development charges, as well as not-for-profit housing. The province will be creating a definition for affordable housing and attainable housing that is now 80% of average market rent or average market sale price. Development charges are now being extended to be in effect for 10 years. Previously, they were 5, and service levels that we have to consider are now being extended out from 15 years instead of 10. So the farther out that you have to project, the less accurate your numbers might be. So that, is a bit of a concern when we're trying to forecast what those future projects are going to look like, the value of those projects to come into that determination as to what your DC rate or development charges rate should be. We will now be required to phase in development charges over a 5-year period. So in the first year, you only collect 80%, 85% in year 2, 90% in year 3, 95% in year 4, and by year 5, you'll be at 100% of the value which you can collect. Next slide, please. There will also be some discounts on the development charges for multi-residential units based on the number of bedrooms and the reductions there on the slide. Annually, we must allocate or spend 60% of the collected development charge. So what that means is that you don't have to spend 60% of your development charges, but you have to identify which projects 60% of what you've collected will go towards. Now, we do have the development charges background study that outlines where you should be allocating those funds based on a project-by-project basis. But as we know, priorities do shift from time to time on the development side. So there might be a project that comes up sooner than what might have been forecast in the background study. So there are other items such as capping interest rates on deferred development charges, removal of housing as an eligible development charge service. That's not something we currently have in our development charges, but certain municipalities, especially larger cities, would include that line as they are housing service providers. And then the prescribed services for which the municipality can collect development charges for will be further restricted, including the removal of studies as development charge eligible. So we do collect development charges to help fund our background study, as well as various other studies that the municipality would undertake, including the master servicing plan. So we'll have more of a shift of those would be funded through the general levy versus being able to divert some of our development charges to support the creation of those studies. The province has also stated that they will set the affordable housing rate that has yet to be posted through a bulletin, and the province has provided no timeline as to what and when that value of what average market rent or attainable housing will be. And the province also has the ability to mandate and provide the agreements in which municipalities and developers have to enter into for those affordable units. And again, no further clarity has been provided, and I have reached out to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for further follow-up, and my local representative has no timeline for when we could expect that information. Next slide, please. So I'm going to preface that this is a kind of a conservative look. It's based off of our current DC values, as I won't know what our 2024 development charges values will look like. Typically, development charges don't decrease. They do increase, especially considering the sheer cost of materials and labor and supply has gone up. So what I did was I looked at, and this is just based off of residential development only, I took our average number of permits, broke it down by the unit type, so singles, semi-detached, townhouse units, and multi-residential unit apartments to come up with the value of what we would collect. And then from there, I applied that 20%, 15%, 10, and 5. So if we just based it off our values alone, we'd look at almost a $1.6 million in lost collected development charges from the fees and value. So that's if we put a new development charges bylaw in effect. So again, 2024 is our timeline. It'll affect the next development charges bylaw. We don't have to do any phasing in right now on our current DCs that are collected.
Can I just ask,
Yep.
though, we had already in our own housing policy exempted affordable units,
Yep.
correct? So did this legislation really have an impact on those existing exemptions at the municipal level when we're talking about affordable units?
So no, because we already exempted them.
Yes.
So those were already units that we weren't collecting development charges for.
So are these calculations based on of the affordable housing units, or is it broader?
That's just, it's more broader. It does not include an affordable housing discount on this at this time.
I see. So
Yeah.
this is not unique to the affordable housing units per se.
No. And this is more the trend of, again, because we haven't collected those DCs from an impact perspective, it's not as if we're going to experience a new impact in regards to the affordable housing piece. Yeah. Next slide, please. So our development charges bylaw is also broken down based on different levels of services that we provide. So there's a percentage of the development charges that goes to roads, water and wastewater, parks, fire service. So what I did was I took the calculation based off of the percentage that we collect against those to provide what that impact would be to the different services, or as our director of finance calls it, buckets, in how we apportion out where those funds go. So as you will see, and I want to point out wastewater facilities, I think is about 36% of the development charges that we do collect. And so that would be just over $500,000 over that 5-year phase-in period, potentially in the future, that we could see uncollected or lost through that phase-in value. And even Parks and Rec, it's $254,000. That's not an insignificant value. And when we start to think about some of the projects that we have going on, the Riverside Park rejuvenation or revitalization or redevelopment, and the expansion of the water pollution control plant, those values don't become insignificant. They are significant in that we would have used those development charges to help pay for that type of infrastructure. So now the municipality has to look for other ways in which we can, cover, the loss on those development charges that we would have collected through that phase-in value. Next slide, please.
I just need to ask another question. That being said, those multi-residential units are typically operated, right, by private for-profit operators who do pay property taxes on the buildings they operate, right?
Yes.
Right. So it's not a total loss, right? Because as you bring more units into your housing portfolio, if you wish, there is property taxes applied to those additional units.
That is correct, Your Worship. And in discussion with our Chief Financial Officer, he did point out that, you are creating more units. There will be an impact. You'll have more assessment coming in on those units. We still haven't realized the reassessment piece through MPAC. So that would help offset the cost, not entirely, but it would be a source of revenue given that you are creating more residents within, more housing units, which would then pay taxation.
Which I trust was partly the intention of the bill, was to find a way to create the conditions. And there's lots of different opinions on the bill, but the point was to try to create the conditions for more multi-residential units to be built, point final, right? Some way or another. Okay.
Yes.
And obviously, it's interesting, I learned at the United Counties that, of course, we're one of a small minority of smaller municipalities in Eastern Ontario with development charges as a mechanism. So for many other municipalities who may not have that DC mechanism, it's not as relevant. Of course, it's very relevant here, and I'm extremely cognizant of our infrastructure needs, so I'm not diminishing the changes, but I think it's important to note that as we bring in more residential units, there is other benefits to that, if you will. Thank you, Councillor Strachan.
Through you, Your Worship, and perhaps Director Martin, you'll be able to answer this when you look at the next slides, and there are some more numbers up there, but we've waived development charges, and we've just agreed to do it for another year for the downtown core, where we're anticipating significant growth. We want to have infill housing. We want to have a lot of that, encouraging the growth in that area, which was the point of waiving those DCs. Perhaps if you, when the numbers come up on the next slide, which talks about multi-residential DC impacts, can you give some sort of sense in a, maybe a big picture kind of way, what development charges we're currently not receiving because of our own decision as opposed to Bill 23? Because I know Bill 23 is bringing in some additional perceived losses, but we've also encouraged greater losses by waiving 100% as well. So I don't know, it's much larger than the numbers we're going to see on the next slide, or where does that sort of land us overall?
So in consideration of the development of these slides, I didn't take into consideration our current exemptions that are in effect right now.
Okay, I think what I guess not for tonight, obviously, if you don't have the numbers, but I think it would be important for us to understand that as a council to say, what are we already putting in place as an accepted loss of revenue through DC charges, while looking at Bill 23, and while I have a lot of concerns about Bill 23 as a whole, I think that we've also encouraged or accepted a certain amount of loss on those charges ourselves as well. So it would be helpful for me, and I'm sure the rest of council, to understand what those numbers look like as well. Thank you.
I'll recognize Councillor Barclay. I certainly think, the provincial legislation contemplated sort of a cost-benefit analysis, if you will, and we have contemplated our own cost-benefit analysis, both in terms of DC exemptions for affordable units, no matter where they're built in North Grenville, and the DC exemption specific to the downtown. So, again, it will be, I think, fantastic to have that discussion next year, because we talk about loss, but I also think there's gain, right? There's two sides to that coin in terms of benefit to seeing housing intensity in the downtown as well. So I'll recognize Councillor Barclay.
Sorry, if I could just add to what you just said, Your Worship. I just would like to make sure that we're not looking at DC charges in isolation and saying, well, Bill 23, we're losing all this money because of Bill 23, but then not also recognizing what we have accepted on our side as well. So I just to look at the whole picture of DC charges, DCs, rather than trying to piecemeal them. That was my intent.
That is,
thank you,
extremely fair, and akin to my question around, we're already exempting and trying to incentivize the development community for affordable housing units, and we did that 4 years ago. So clearly, we're in the conversation, if you will. So quantifying it, absolutely, I think will help us, especially as we move forward with our own DC review in a year. Okay, I'll recognize Councillor Barclay and then over to Ms. Martin. Does that work? Did you have any clarifying comment right now, Ms. Martin? Sorry.
I think, I just wanted to clarify that a majority of the development charges that we collect are mainly on single semis and towns. So we haven't really seen that full impact on the multi-residential units, which is where, the municipalities had more of a focus on, especially on the rental side, trying to create more of those opportunities for affordable rentals. I certainly, I hear your point loud and clear, Councillor Strachan, and we can do our best to pull some figures together and share that with council as to kind of what our current impact is. But I just wanted to kind of really express the point that current development is mostly singles, semis, and towns. So, and my next slide when we get there, and I know there's some other questions, maybe I'll explain some of the nuances of what's in here.
Councillor Barclay, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment, and perhaps Director Martin can comment on my comment. We're trying to the municipality and all municipalities are trying to navigate a very fluid situation, as are developers, and we're trying to incentivize developers to build more multi-unit residences, not just downtown, but throughout North Grenville. So we are ahead of the game. Credit to the mayor's task force in terms of encouraging more affordable building, and we're using a definition of affordability. I think 30% of income based on median income here, or we're also using 80% of the market value. So I guess the question to Director Martin is, as you're talking to developers in this very fluid situation, how, they're investing funds, how are they reacting to this level of uncertainty, where the province has yet to come down with a definition that they can use in terms of financing and projecting, return on investment?
Through your worship to the Deputy Mayor, What I will say is that there's a lot of concern on the part of the development community that the province has yet to define what that value looks like, what that scalability looks like. Is it regional? Is it provincial? Is it localized to a municipality? Is it based on like census regions, regional market areas? None of that's been communicated out to the municipalities. So that uncertainty is creating some uncertainty amongst the development community, whereby they're entering into agreements with municipalities for the provision of affordable housing, yet I can't provide them with what that value looks like. And I can tell you in our pre-consultation meetings with developers, that is a big concern to them, because there's nothing, when they're doing their pro formas, they're trying to understand, what will that impact look like on my development when they're putting their proposals together. Anecdotally, in discussion with a developer, and I will not name names, just to preserve the anonymity in our conversation. But they don't see how Bill 23 benefits them in any way. They, in many ways, especially some of our more local developers who've had a good working relationship with the municipality, just see that the stripping away of some of the review on the conservation authority side is just adding more burden to the municipalities on the review, and they only see things taking longer than actually creating more efficiencies. So there's, you can't say speak for every developer. That's just one developer's experience. But I will say that, we do our best to efficiently review development applications and provide approvals where we can to ensure that development moves forward. So I think that everyone has an opinion on what the, intent, the outcome of Bill 23 is, but I don't think the, developers in our area have overly seen the benefits of the bill itself. We still see strong interest in North Grenville, regardless of Bill 23. People see us as a growing community and the benefits that our community brings, and wanting to create more opportunities for more residents to be here, and for individuals to stay and kind of grow in this community through all stages of life.
Okay, so you'll carry on to the next slide?
Sorry?
You'll carry on to the next slide?
Yes.
Or there's no other questions? Okay.
Yeah. So I want to preface that this is a 10-year projection. So looking at some scenarios based on some conversations we've had with developers and some applications that we've received. So what I've done is provided a bit of an analysis and provided and again, this is not real world examples. I had, did some forecasting as to what that impact would look like based on the reduced development charges from a bedroom perspective. So based on my 3 scenarios here, and you tried to provide scenarios where it kind of hit different of our different composition and makeup of units that we could expect, including a development with a special care aspect to it. The municipality would see a variety of losses on the development charges collected, and I believe that, and I should have put the total on that slide, it's just under $1.2 million in lost development charge rental over a 10-year period. If we go to the next slide, I've also broken it down based on our service buckets again, just showing what that impact would be when we start to look at how we fund our different development projects based on those categories. And if we go to the next slide, which has kind of that summary of values over the next 10 years, hypothetically, and again, this is just forecasting and providing some foresight based off of our current DCs. Over 10 years, we'd be looking at a potential loss of around $2.8 million in collected development charges. But again, remembering, the statement that Mayor Peckford made is that we would also see the benefit of those, that new assessment and that new taxation coming in to help offset some of those costs. So the value of what we would potentially lose, we would have to figure out other mechanisms, whether it's through seeking out provincial or federal funding sources, to try and alleviate that from having the tax base carry any costs related to that development growth piece. Just to know if there's any questions on. Okay, perfect. Presented this again previously, so I'll kind of take it more high level. So there's going to be some changes to our parkland requirements. Affordable housing units, attainable housing units, and inclusionary zoning units will be exempt from parkland dedication requirements. This is a big concern, as in that typically affordable housing units and attainable housing units are designed to be smaller from a cost perspective, from an affordability perspective, and that, more density. So it's taking away that much needed green space for those types of units. Not-for-profit housing would also be exempt. Cash in lieu alternative standards would be further reduced from 1 hectare per 500 dwelling units to 1 hectare per 1,000 dwelling units. So again, we're shrinking the amount of parkland that may be required. We must have an established parks plan in place prior to an adoption of a parkland dedication bylaw. We are required to now consider privately owned public spaces, or what are considered POPs. So that could be like an apartment building is built, it's all rentals, it's still privately owned, but there might be a like a park or like a play area. We can consider that as parkland dedication. The municipalities will now be required to take encumbered lands as parkland dedication, which could further reduce our ability to develop those lands for parkland, especially if there is a utility corridor that runs through. Obviously, you can't build over those utilities with infrastructure. And then similar to the DC bylaw, 60% of our parkland reserve fund must be spent or allocated on an annual basis. So again, you don't have to spend it, but you still have to allocate it to a project. Next slide, please. The next biggest impact, development charges and, the finances of the municipality, are the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act, which will diminish the role of, and has already diminished the role of conservation authorities when it comes to development-related projects. So the conservation authorities are no longer permitted to provide programs or services that are related to reviewing and commenting on proposals, applications, or other matters made under a prescribed act. And there's a bunch of acts, including the Planning Act, which are impacted. Their program and services fees are now considered frozen, and they cannot increase them. Development permits required from the Conservation Authority will be restricted, and additional exemptions will be provided where approval is being provided through the Planning Act. So, say we have a site plan application for a property, if they would require a Section 28 permit under the Conservation Authorities Act, the approval would then be given through the site plan planning approval authority and not the Conservation Authority. There are some time frame reductions for non-decisions being reduced from 120 days to 90 days. And there's other changes to public consultation in regards to the disposition of land. Regulations and requirements related to wetlands will also be reduced. So what we're seeing with our Conservation Authority partners is that their role has essentially been diminished to looking at things from a natural hazard perspective, so floodplain. They are no longer providing comment on matters related to wetlands. So typically the conservation authorities would provide that review on, say, like an environmental impact study or a species at risk, looking at wetland evaluations. That was a service that we greatly relied on our conservation authority partners to provide. So we no longer have that. The only comments they'll provide is where it may relate to water quantity impacts on watercourses that may be associated with, say, like a wetland. This is new territory for both the conservation authorities and municipalities to navigate, and I will say that both CAs, both South Nation and Rideau Valley, have been really great in communicating out, their understanding of the changes and how we're going to work together moving forward. But what I want to say is that from an impact perspective is that that now puts more on the municipality on the review side. So we're spending more time having to find, those firms to provide the review for us, and it may not be any quicker, given that all municipalities are now looking to find those expertise external to provide review on those documents. Discussions that we're also having with my counterparts across the United Counties is how do we tackle this to try and ensure that we are getting reviews done in a timely manner. One of the solutions, and staff will be putting forth a request for proposal soon to start to retain some firms to have on a list so that we can send out an environmental impact study or species at risk study or a wetland evaluation so that we know who we can go to provide that service without having to kind of always do a call for quotes every time we have something that comes in that's not often a standard requirement. Next slide, please. Site plan control changes, we're starting to see this come up with some recent applications as of last week. Multi-residential buildings with 10 or less residential units are now exempted from site plan control, and we can no longer provide any influence over exterior designs of building and through site plan control, and we cannot address exterior landscaping. So that's something that we used to require developers to provide. Next slide, please. Other Planning Act implications include public meetings are no longer required for plans of subdivision. This is quite concerning as council's experienced in the past. There are residents who do have concerns in relation to development. It's not that they're anti-development, it's that they are immediately impacted and that they own property adjacent or within the area, and they just want to know how things are going to be done to protect their own interests in the area. That mechanism is gone to be able to have that public forum. I do want to recognize that staff are asking developers ahead of their applications to hold community open houses to solicit that feedback at the start and provide that feedback through to staff so we can provide it through to council when we come forward with draft conditions to understand how community concerns have been addressed. Third-party appeals are going to be limited to prescribed bodies under the Planning Act in relation to consents and to minor variances. There's a moratorium on applications to amend new official plan and zoning bylaws for 2 years so that you're not having amendments come forward when a new plan is put in place. We can pass resolutions and have in the past to allow for applications during that moratorium. The province will prescribe certain upper tier regional governments as being upper tiers with no planning authority and those with planning authority. So that's not going to impact us. Our relationship with the counties will remain the same. It's more of the larger regional governments that were impacted through that change. And then gentle intensification will now be permitted by allowing up to 3 residential units within a single structure. Next slide. So not all elements of Bill 23 will come into effect at once. There will be various regulations that will be updated and posted through the Environmental Review Office. So it is publicly posted for municipalities to provide comment. And again, the province will continue to make these regulatory changes to assist in implementing this new bill. Municipal staff, it's hard to say new, it feels like it's been around for quite a while. Municipal staff will continue to bring forth new information to council as it becomes available for their consideration and comment to the province, so we can provide comment through the ERO. Staff, again, are continuing to review our internal processes to address the changes that are being brought in by Bill 23 and subsequently Bill 109, which was introduced in July of last year. So we're seeing significant impacts to planning and development, especially in regards to timeline on reviews, penalties for not meeting review timelines, development charges, Conservation Authorities Act. There's a lot to address, but we're hopeful that we can start to bring forward some more process changes to address these changes and to continue to try and support reaching some housing goals provincially, but even locally, and creating more opportunities for residential development.
Good. Thank you. Any remaining questions for Amy at this time? Not seeing any. It was a very fulsome report, Amy. Thank you. I know you've given this a lot of thought and tried to bring your best in terms of analysis to the table, so certainly appreciate it. I'll just recognize Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, and not so much a question, but just a point for anybody who may be listening online or who is interested in finding out more and being able to ask questions about Bill 23. Sustainable North Grenville is putting together presentations as part of the Sustainability Fair, and one of them will be on Bill 23. Summer Casgrain Robertson, who's the GM over at the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, as well as our own Deputy Director of Planning and Development, Phil Mosier, will be there to give presentations to talk about some of this more in detail, give their perspectives from the Conservation Authority's perspective and the municipality's perspective, respectively. And there'll be an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So if there's more information that's being sought, that would be a perfect opportunity for residents and local attendees to do so.
Any other comments, colleagues? Councillor Barclay?
Yeah, well, if you're looking for a comment, I'm just digesting some of the impacts on parkland dedication, and I think we're very lucky to be investing so much in Riverside Park, because if people are going to create affordable housing, downtown is where you can do it. The restrictions or the requirements to provide parkland and amenity space have been reduced or eliminated, and I think having a revitalized Riverside Park will make it much easier for people to live in affordable housing that doesn't have that parkland dedicated or amenity space available.
Indeed. I think that is a good point, and the investments in Riverside Park are timely and being anxiously awaited by many members of the community. So it's great to see that that's going to come to light, and I know that the splash pad, as we understand it, should be ready by the end of July, I'm hearing. So with the rink, the outdoor rink with refrigeration, which is great, given the fluctuations in temperatures these days, should be ready for the winter season. Okay, so we'll, I think, just move a motion to receive Amy's presentation on Bill 23. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Strachan? Councillor Barclay, thank you. And I'll call the vote on that. All in favor, please. Good. And I'm just going to call a 10-minute break. I know we still have some work to do, so I think we need to stretch our legs. Thanks. Okay, welcome back, council colleagues. Great to have you in the room. Just a few last items. Before we get to Public Works, I'm just going to go back to Mr. Ogarende in case he has a general update under finance. Anything you'd like to add this evening, Mr. Ogarende?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to give a quick update on some of the items we had discussed during the budget. So on slide 25 of the budget presentation, the 2023 budget presentation, we had estimated the county taxes to be at 10%, but subsequently we had also received confirmation that the county tax rate was going to be at 6.87%. So the impact of this on the general property tax rate increase for 2023 actually brings that number down from 5.34%, 5.39% previously reported during the presentation to just about 4.35% on an average assessment value of $400,000. So this would also result in a property dollar increase of just about $198. Same on the average assessment value of $400,000.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that update. Understand Councillor Strachan had also done some quick math, which aligned. So glad to provide that further clarity. So appreciate it. Are we good, Mr. Ogarende? Was it your one item?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll also go to, we'll next go to Public Works, and over to you, Ms. Dunlop, for 2 items.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to authorize the issuance of a tile drain loan. Next slide. Tile drain loans are subject to availability through the Ministry of Agriculture, Foods and Rural Affairs and currently have an applicant maximum of $50,000. Next slide. Bylaw 9320 allows the municipality to provide access to funds for local farmers for tile drainage installations through an application process, followed by an inspection and loan calculation. The ministry must approve, and the municipality then collects and tracks the loan. Next slide. Public Works received an application on December the 12th, 2022 for a tile drain loan. The application is complete and complies with the requirements. Next slide. It is recommended the amount and works be authorized and the loan proceed in accordance with the Tile Drainage Act. That completes my report.
Great, thank you. Any questions, colleagues, in regards to this particular presentation? If there are none, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the motion as presented on the agenda. Councillor Barclay, Councillor O'Sullivan. In the absence of other comments or questions, I will call the question. All in favor, please? Good. Thank you. That carries. We'll go to the Kennedy Road speed reduction.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's no presentation for this report. The purpose of this report is for Council to authorize a temporary speed reduction on Kennedy Road. With the speed reduction on Kennedy Road 40, I stand corrected, there is a report.
I believe you probably had a hand in grading it.
I did not, I had a hand in the report, not the presentation.
Gotcha.
So.
All right. Good stuff. All right, go ahead.
With the speed reduction on County Road 43, from east of County Road 22 to the urban core, and with current construction for the installation of a roundabout at the 22 and 43 intersection, it is recommended to reduce the full length of Kennedy Road to 60 kilometers per hour. The municipality is undertaking a full assessment for Kennedy Road for a permanent speed evaluation, which will be completed once the roadway classification project is complete. This is expected to be completed by the end of summer 2023. Public Works has received complaints from residents on Kennedy Road, specifically regarding excessive speed, increased amounts of traffic, and used as a bypass to the County Road 43 and 22 intersection. The intent of this temporary speed reduction is to take into consideration the construction operations and the cut-through traffic that typically happens during a local construction project and provides the OPP an enforcement tool. In order for the speed reduction to be enforceable, speed limit signage will be installed should the bylaw pass. And that completes my report, and I apologize about the presentation.
think we're very glad to see the presentation, so good teamwork. Any questions or concerns, colleagues, in regards to this report? Councillor Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, to Karen Dunlop, Director Dunlop. Would we, just for future consideration, is this after the assessment, is this something that could be a permanent fixture on Kennedy Road?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Wilson, yes, this is a consideration that will be taken. We will do a full assessment. The road classifications will assist, as well as the speed policies and the traffic calming policies as previously passed by this council. So yes, it will be a consideration, will be assessed, and it will come back to this council once that report is complete.
Thank you.
Great. Any other concerns or questions here? Ms. Dunlop, I was going to ask, it's yet another road that's, I know it has sort of minor kind of, they're not hills, but it's not just a straight flat road. It sort of goes up and down a little bit in certain places. Do you see the need for other traffic calming, such as one of those flashing signs that helps to cue people to their speed? I just worry that old habits are hard to break, and we know that speed on that road appears to have been a problem for quite a number of years. The use of that road is obviously accelerating as an alternative route, if you will. So can you anticipate, or would you anticipate using some other measures to help slow people down?
Thank you, Your Worship. There will be two other measures that we look at. First is the new starburst sign that will be placed on the speed reduced signs for the fact that people assume it's an 80. It's always been an 80, so hey, what's changed? So we have to make sure that we highlight with that starburst that it is now a 60 zone and to ask people to comply. Through our temporary installations of the speed radar signs, which are the flashing lights that say, hey, you're going too fast, or thank you very much for the assigned speed on the road, those will be included in the rotation.
Likely an important measure to help people sort of check in with themselves, right? If they're used to going a certain speed on that road. Okay, I don't see any other hands, looking for other hands. Okay, so then the motion is presented on our agenda, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Strachan, thank you very much. In the absence of other comments, I will call the question. All in favor, please. Good, thank you. So that concludes Public Works this evening. Is that right, Ms. Dunlop?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, so we'll go on to Parks, Rec, and Culture. I don't believe we have anyone here from Parks and Rec this evening. Okay, so we'll go to Emergency and Protective Services. Welcome, Chief Holcomb. Is there anything you'd like to add this evening?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a couple short announcements for Council this evening. I want to update Council. You may recall that in February, the Chief Fire Officers Association in Leeds and Grenville conducted a food drive countywide. All fire departments within the counties participated in the food drive. As a result of that food drive, 11-day food drive, we had very successfully received slightly over 4,000 pounds of food, as well as $8,500 in cash donations. All this food and donations were, the donations obviously put towards the acquisition of food, as well as the 4,000 pounds of food were donated back into 13 area food banks within Leeds and Grenville. So a very successful winter program. We were very pleased to be able to assist with that need. And the fire services really just wanted to thank our community across the counties of Leeds and Grenville for their gracious donations that went towards this cause. I think it's a wonderful testament to the caring and kindness in our community. So it was a very successful program. Another update, Council, I wanted to provide is regarding the downtown fire that occurred February 25th on Prescott Street. The fire department has concluded their operations at the building, and it has been turned back over to the owner and their insurer. The fire department no longer has any authority over the building. Council is aware that the fire department ordered the placement of barricades to prevent pedestrians from walking around the building. The intent of that was there was some metal roofing. If you look up above, there's metal roofing and some debris that's a concern to public safety. So that is why we closed that short portion of sidewalk. With now back into the hands of the building owner and their insurer, it will be up to them to acquire engineers, structural engineers, to assess the state of the building. And then I'm sure that they'll make a determination at that time for the proper opening of the sidewalk. I think just on our part, we would like to, as a safety note, address the public that any pedestrians that are walking down the sidewalk, that they obey the closed sidewalk. And we highly recommend that they use the appropriate crosswalks for proper safety and not to walk on the road, because that could be a safety concern as well. If the fire department does become aware of any changes, we'll certainly advise accordingly. The last item that I want to advise council on is another safety message. Now that the spring is in the air and the warmer temperatures are arriving, the ice conditions in and about our water bodies are very unsafe, and the water courses may have fast-moving water. So at this time, the fire department would really like to advise the community that they should avoid these areas, and especially keep children and your pets away from these ice conditions and fast-moving water. Our local conservation authorities, South Nation and as well as Rideau Valley, do put out regular information and safety notices and advisories. Please pay attention to those as well. Those are the updates that I have for council, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on a very successful and inaugural food drive. I assume you might be doing it again next year, is that right?
Our committee has met and discussed the results of it, and the organizers of the local food banks have requested our assistance again next year, so something will be forthcoming probably next year as well.
And while you're here, Chief Oakham, I was in Johnstown today, joining the paramedic service for an announcement and a partnership with Wounded Warriors to expedite access to trauma-informed mental health care. Wounded Warriors was initially founded to serve veterans, but they've expanded into serving first responders, particularly emergency and protective services. I'm just curious, and perhaps you can bring this back later if you don't wish to answer it now. If we have other first responders, and I think of fire services a lot, when I am engaged at the county level with the paramedics, what sort of access to trauma-informed care would they have as either volunteers or as employees of the municipality?
Certainly, Your Worship, there are different programs available to the fire service in Ontario, and it is an area of interest to the Ontario Fire Service, and there have been many courses and many opportunities for fire services to attend learning sessions, and also sessions that if individuals feel that they need to use the service, there are services available. The municipality of North Grenville has an employee program. Firefighters do not have benefits, but under the employee program, we do have the ability to reach out for assistance under the employee program for that nature. So there are some readily available agencies that are there for the fire service as well.
Okay, thank you. As I learn more, I'm happy to share, because it seems like there's some good external organizations that are well equipped to ensure that first responders get the attention they need, given their immense dedication and sacrifice to keep us all safe. So with that, we conclude Chief Oakham's informal report to council, and I believe we're at the confirmatory bylaw. So with that in mind, I'll look for a mover and a seconder. I see that there is no correspondence this evening. No other business. I should ask, is there a notice of motion this evening? None? Then I understand that we've considered all of our bylaws. Is that right, Ms. Janot? Okay. And I don't see any media remaining in the room. So then I'll return to our confirmation bylaw. That is that bylaw 3823 to confirm proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on March 21st, 23 be adopted and passed. Mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Barclay and Councillor Sullivan. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. And a resolution to adjourn. Councillors Wilson, Strachan, thank you. And we are adjourning at 8:28 p.m. I'll call the vote. Non-debatable. All in favor? Thank you. That passes.